Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. My name's Jack McCullough. I'm the founder and president of the CFO Leadership Council. You can follow this podcast online at www.rockstarcfos.com. We have a great guest today, so we're going to just get right into it. Kelly MacDonald is the CFO of Dynavax. Kelly, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Jack, thanks so much for having me. I'm a first-time caller, long-time listener.
Oh, I love that expression. So cool. Well, I have to admit, until you and I met relatively recently, I wasn't previously familiar with your company. So maybe you could share the 10,000-foot overview on Dynavax?
Sure. So first of all, as you mentioned, I'm Kelly MacDonald. I'm the CFO of Dynavax. Dynavax is a biopharmaceutical company based in the Bay Area here in California. And we develop and commercialize innovative vaccines to protect the world and public health against infectious diseases. Our novel technology is actually a vaccine adjuvant, which is really a substance that enhances the body's immune response when it's combined with protein-based antigen, and that's what we use to create our vaccines. From 10,000-foot level, we do have a core commercial asset. It's an adult hepatitis B vaccine sold in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. and Europe. It's poised to be the leading product in its category. We've also, commercialized our proprietary vaccine adjuvant through multiple COVID-19 vaccine collaborations around the world outside of the United States, which I'm sure we'll get into, in a bit here in the upcoming questions. And then we also have an exciting earlier stage clinical pipeline of a couple of different vaccine candidates that we're really, really excited about. So it's been extremely rewarding to play the role I've been able to play for the company for the last couple of years, not only to help improve public health overall, but I'm really proud of our work to support vaccination and particularly during the global pandemic when there really was no playbook. So appreciate the opportunity to be here today, Jack.
And is it public or private?
Dynavax is a publicly held company, trades on the NASDAQ with all of our other biotech friends. It's been a very volatile environment for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart investing in that sector these days. So, but it's the sector. People are just always going to be gravitating towards that, right? They always, the baby boomers are, almost all of us are retired, and the sector generally has just got such a bright future. So it's a great sector to be part of, I have to think. But before we get into Dynavax and your professional career, I'd like to know a little bit about your background before you were a accountant and financial person. Where'd you grow up, Kelly?
Sure. So I grew up in a small town in Northwest Connecticut called Burlington. I think at the time I grew up there, it was less than 6,000 people in the town. We had one half of a stoplight. It was sort of just a light that mostly worked, but it worked just as like a blinking red at the top of a hill. So I had strong influences from my close community there. Very, very close with my family. Both of my parents, worked full time, and my brother, turned out to be an exceptional athlete. So I found myself just surrounded by incredible people who are some of the most hardworking people I've been able to meet my whole life. So made me really motivated to want to always be the hardest working person in the room, which has served, at least in the beginning of my career. I've had to evolve that over time, but really grateful for my kind of the foundational years.
It's interesting. I didn't know this about you until right now, and I bet you didn't know about me either. But I actually grew up in a town called Burlington.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it was a little bigger than your Burlington. I grew up in Burlington, Massachusetts, And in my childhood, it was very much a small and farming type of community. So, yeah, we might have been 10 years ahead of the curve on you. Right now, if you don't know, Burlington it's crazy town. Like, when me and my high school classmates, talk about the town that we grew up in, it's almost unrecognizable to us. So, but cool. You mentioned that your brother was an exceptional athlete, and I believe you were a very accomplished athlete on your own. You played at UMass.
I played at Fairfield University,
Oh,
where I went
Fairfield.
to
I'm sorry.
undergrad. I got my MBA at UMass, and my brother's a far more accomplished athlete than I am. He's a sub 2 hour and 20 minute marathoner to this
Oh
day,
my.
which is just unbelievably impressive. I'll take every opportunity I can to tout his accomplishments, and it just serves to be such an incredible inspiration for me. And like I said, both of my parents were working. We growing up in a small area, all of our friends, including my brother in this case, we all worked at the local McDonald's, which was 2 towns away. So that was sort of the nearest place that we all were able to work. And we had a great time there. We made a lot of great memories, and I think for being the first job after getting our driver's licenses, it was a really unique way to not only understand how teams work, how to solve problems through different different dynamic and fast moving challenges, kind of like I said, working with different people. So that was important from a sort of foundational work perspective. And you mentioned sports in the role that sports played in my life. Sort of similarly pulling on that thread of collaboration and teamwork and problem solving. I think for me, growing up playing softball and getting the opportunity to travel all around the country during high school, and then ultimately I played 1 year of Division I softball at college. It was sort of those same themes I was able to rely on, and realize that for me personally, that's what motivates me, is to work with other people and to solve problems with other people and to have fun while I do it.
It's amazing. It's funny. You worked in a McDonald's in Burlington. I worked at a Burger King in Burlington. So, but so I just have to ask, because I have a theory on this. Is your brother, who's more accomplished than you, is he older or younger than you? I'm sorry, more athletically accomplished. I'm sorry, to be clear on that.
He's 2 years younger than me.
Yeah, see, that's my theory, because my younger sister is a much better athlete than me. And I don't want to diminish her confidence, because she was very good athlete naturally, and she worked hard to become a good athlete. But I think having me as an older brother, beating her until I'm like 4 years older than her. So I was, I'd play basketball against her. I wouldn't let her win. By the time she hit 17, she didn't really need it didn't matter if I would let her win. That was around the point she would let me win once in a while, maybe. But I think having an older sibling that competes against you probably does make you a better athlete. Just a working theory I have. So.
I love that theory. I'm going to bring it back to him today, actually, and try that one on for size. I'm as competitive as a person can possibly be. So there was never a single moment where I let him win anything. And for quite some time, I was just physically larger, both width and height. And, so I had a physical advantage. But I think there might be something to that, Jack.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, people thought I was a complete jerk. My sister and I playing basketball. I'm 12, she's 7. I'm swatting her shots away and stuff. And but she was probably the reason she was a 4-year starter by the time she got to high school. So, but cool. So that's interesting. So you graduated, finished your education. Did you get an MBA along the way, or did you get it right after undergrad?
No, I went to work at PwC, so that's where I really cut my teeth and learned a heck of a lot about not only the biotech industry, but also the tech industry. And I had some other opportunities to get some great transaction experience. I started my career at PricewaterhouseCoopers out of the Stamford office, but the Stamford office is part of the New York Metro group. So we really served clients throughout New York, the whole New York Metro area, which was a really great opportunity for me to learn a lot, like I mentioned, and across a number of sectors. I actually started my career during the financial crisis, so I was acutely aware of the fact that I needed to have a stable job. And it was sort of, part and parcel, one of the reasons why I didn't stay another year in college to get my MBA. I made the decision to get some career experience and some work experience, and then pursue both my CPA and MBA after a few years of real life professional experience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, and you worked, when you worked there, was it PricewaterhouseCoopers or was it PwC or?
Both. I think both. It was
Okay.
synonymous at the time, and then I think now it's just PwC with the rebranding.
Yeah, because when I started my career, the firm that's and you probably know this, but the firm that is now known as KPMG, at the time it was Pete Marwick and Mitchell. And like sometimes I still refer to that experience as I worked at Pete Marwick, and young people like, what's that? So, but yeah, it's interesting. So you have a CPA and an MBA, and which, if you were to advise a young person in a hypothetical world, they could only pick one. Would you recommend a CPA for a CFO job or an MBA for a CFO type job?
Yeah, what an interesting question. Both have been extremely valuable, and not as much the letters as the experience. Certainly an MBA, at least in my particular experience, because I had a few years of professional expertise under my belt already. I was able to learn a lot about problem solving, different ways of thinking from non-finance folks and folks outside of the industry, and that was really valuable for me during that experience. Differently for the CPA, it's all the technical skills that are needed to sort of really understand what drives the financial statements and where judgments are appropriate, and how to sort of think about the broader corporate finance concepts, which is extremely valuable as well. So I think the combination of CPA and MBA is a great one for CFOs, especially today's CFOs, who are certainly expected to be very professionally competent and subject matter experts, not only in accounting but also across all corporate finance concepts, as well as operations, as well as it's sort of been the way the CFO seat has evolved now, more corporate strategy and real strategic thinkers. So the CFO is expected to cover a lot of ground, and be able to think not only technically from a very competent perspective, but also strategically. So to me,
Yeah.
I can't pick one. I think it's both, and that would be my guidance, and that is the guidance that I share with folks on my team.
Well, that's great. And we'll talk about it later, but I know you love the mentoring aspect of your job as well. So, but cool. But I want to check a little bit. So you left PwC and then you went to Ironwood Pharmaceuticals, and tell us a little about that. And, as importantly, how that prepared you to become a CFO at Dynavax.
Yeah, absolutely. So PwC was such a foundational and critical stepping stone to my career. I started in assurance, as I mentioned it. My first few weeks were during the financial crisis, so the company was going through layoffs, and not having all that context coming in as a 22-and-a-half-year-old, seeing that straight away, it reminded me to sort of just go back to basics and just put my head down and work as hard as I possibly could, which, as I mentioned, I sort of always have enjoyed that. And that's always been the role modeling that my family has given to me as quite a gift, it turns out in hindsight. So I really leaned into that and, just took on as many opportunities as I could. And, as folks left, in any organization, when it's going through a period of dynamic change, there's opportunities because the ground is moving from underneath. So I sort of said yes to every single opportunity. One of the opportunities that was sort of outside of the scope of the industry I was working in at the time was actually a startup pharma client, or biotech client. And that client, over the course of a couple of years of me serving it from an audit perspective, ended up getting FDA approval for their first drug. And I was in the audit room, and that was a really pivotal moment for me, where I realized, wow, this is really neat, because I was able to see this drug through development, meet with scientists, sit with these biologists and chief chief scientific officers and chief executive officers, and I was in the room with some of these folks as they made some of these decisions, and I just felt like that was a really, really, really unique opportunity to be part of that story, even though I was sort of very far removed as the auditor, sort of outside looking in and corroborating their financial statements. But that's really what spurred the love for biotech and my passion for the industry. So I knew I wanted to, eventually, once I put my years in at PwC and learned as much as I could and built my network at PwC, I knew I wanted to go into the sector. And with Ironwood, I saw a really unique opportunity to in a growing company that had just launched what's now a $1 billion product, a very successful product. Saw a team of dynamic set of leaders and a tremendous amount of growth opportunity. So I joined as a technical accountant and somewhat of a bean counter, building the SEC filings, and used that as a platform to just learn, to ask tons of questions and learn everything I could about the company and the biology and sort of the corporate strategy. And I was able to just sort of leverage that background and my accounting background as a baseline to continue to grow and develop and take on a variety of roles. Ultimately at Ironwood, it was part of some of the most critical strategic decisions at that organization. Multiple commercial launches, including a couple of failed commercial launches, which was disappointing at the time, served though as a tremendous growth opportunity for all of us who were part of it to know, sometimes what not to do is just as important as what to do. Saw a lot of business development, and it also, with that, some important lessons there. Integration sometimes is just as important, if not more important, than the actual math behind the deal itself and the strategic logic of the deal itself. And then maybe most importantly, in my time at Ironwood, surrounded by incredible mentors who sort of really helped me grow and develop as such an important sort of pivotal part of my career.
Kelly, you're stealing all of my questions that I had for you, and I do plan on asking you about your mentorship. But it's interesting that, well, first of all, I just love the fact that you referred to yourself as 22 and a half years old. So,
that's how I felt at the time.
Yeah, I don't think I've called myself by the half year since I was about 7 or 8. So that's great that you've held on to that. But you mentioned that you started out as a bean counter, and yet you had the intellectual curiosity that you started to think beyond that. And this is still, relatively early in your career, right? So you recognize that finance accounting is great, but to really be a value add, you've got to understand the entire business.
You do. I mean, nowadays, and one of the key things that we focus on in our finance and accounting organization at Dynavax is, making sure that everybody sees the finance org and what we do in finance as a strategic asset to the company. And, so it ends up being so much more than just reporting on historical performance, not only as well as, obviously projecting future performance. It's also identifying the gaps, identifying growth opportunities, and, laying out different alternative paths that the company can take and can consider, and what's the risk profile, particularly in biotech, of, the different ways we can deploy capital to drive long-term value. So there's so many elements that are unique to this industry and to the biotech sector that I personally find a lot of passion in. And being in the CFO seat and in finance in general, at any organization in the sector, you get such a tremendous opportunity to create value and to learn so much about the company.
Yeah, it's a remarkable job, and it wasn't necessarily 30 years ago, right? It was sort of a back office after the fact type of job. But earlier you mentioned the importance of mentors to your career. And are there any mentors along the way whom you've met that, you could think of and say, yeah, he or she had a tremendous impact on what I'm doing now, years later?
Many mentors. I feel so fortunate that I sort of find myself reflecting on, in preparation for even like this podcast, who have been the most influential people in my career. And I've been so fortunate to have senior leaders in finance as well as outside of finance, in commercial and executive office leaders that CEOs throughout my career that have just been so inspirational and influential, and all in their own very unique ways. But to me, the thing that a good leader does is inspire confidence and give you the courage to take risks. I think, as I reflect on my personal career journey, I've taken a lot of risks, and some of them have paid off in more accelerated fashions than others. Some of them were a little bit of a step back in order to learn something new, and maybe I would have ended up failing at that thing, but that was a decision that at the time I knew and was okay with, because I know every risk you take, you're going to learn one way or another, even if it doesn't necessarily positively contribute to the ultimate trajectory of your career.
I've had friends that work at Google, which the most innovative company in the world, and they've shared with me that the failure rate within Google is surprisingly high. But why it's an innovative and successful culture is it's only a failure if you don't learn from it. It's like, okay, what did you learn? Let's go and try the next one. Sounds like you've sort of, without thinking of it in such terms, you have a bit of a similar philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think, unique to this sector itself, it's a constant reminder that everything we do, every dollar we spend, it's sort of a one in whatever it is, a 1 in 10 or 1 in 100 success rate at any given stage of scientific discovery. But you can't stop doing the hard work, and you can't stop exploring and innovating, because that's when companies fail, and that's when personally you stop growing. So I think what applies to big picture corporate philosophy also can apply to the individual as well.
Yeah, complacency, I think, is maybe the biggest killer of companies, right? No one can catch us, no one can come up with better products, and then you've got 3 people living in their parents' garage that is going to come up with a better product pretty soon. So cool. So you've had these great experiences, worked for 2 companies, taken a lot from each. Tell us about Dynavax. How'd that opportunity become available, and what about it attracted you to the role?
So it's my first time CFO seat at Dynavax. So I'm still, although I had a rookie year in 2021, this is technically my rookie season, I suppose, as a CFO. I feel like we've been through a tremendous amount of growth as a company, and really proud of the transformation that the company's made since, certainly since I joined, in 2021. But what really brought me to the role is the opportunity to make a meaningful impact during the pandemic. So going to work for a vaccine company during the middle of a global pandemic was not for the faint of heart necessarily.
I suppose not.
It was a big decision, and for me and for my family, it was also a cross country move. So born and raised in New England, and then I spent the majority of my adult life in Boston. Moving to the Bay Area was exciting, very nerve-wracking, but ultimately just a chance to work with this group of people and this company that had a mission that I really aligned with, really believed in, and I'm sure, and I've listened to other folks on the podcast iterate this as well, but it's all about who the team that you're working with, and being passionate about the work that you're doing. That's where I find the most value, and that's where I find the most motivation. And Dynavax really hit every single one of those notes for me.
That makes a lot of sense. And you use the phrase, I may get it wrong, but repositioning the definition of the CFO. And tell us about that. How do you want people to think of CFOs going forward?
It's one of the things that I've been working on since joining Dynavax too, actually, and it's really around helping people see, helping not only the company but the whole executive team as well as the board understand that the finance organization is truly a strategic asset to the company when built properly and when leveraged strategically. For Dynavax, it's interesting. One of the we talked a little bit about personally what brought me to the company and all the feel good factors there that you think about when you want to, who do you want to be surrounded with in a room as you kind of punch through walls and get through tough challenges together. But just as much of that is sort of my, the technical competencies that are required. So, making sure that, you sort of have that view on capital allocation that matches up with the company's strategic initiatives and priorities and long-term growth. Having those things be hand in hand is critical for to be successful at driving value. You can't deploy capital and to generate value if that's not aligned with your strategic mission and vision. So you really have to have the CEO and CFO and board have to have a very strong partnership and alignment. And uniquely, that was something that I was looking for as well in my first time CFO seat, of course, is that I could be really aligned closely with the board's vision and the CEO's vision. And so I think all these themes come together.
I'd like to talk about that. So your relationship with the CEO of the company, and he had about a 10-year head start with you on the company, maybe even a little bit longer than that, right? Is he the founder of the company, the CEO? No,
he's not the founder.
Okay.
He came on, I believe, and I hope I don't misquote this. Sorry, Ryan, if I do. But I believe he came on as a consultant, as an assistant controller, and really, sort of worked his way through the organization and was curious and very intellectually capable, and sort of moved his way from accounting to finance to commercial finance. Ultimately, was a brand lead for what's now our lead commercial asset. He led the restructuring of the company back in 2018 and into 2019. The company's been through a number of different eras, and that's kind of how I think about organizational growth. And one of this we're in right now, we just sort of wrapped up the most recent era and are starting on the next one. Ryan's just been a tremendous thought partner and a tremendous leader, and somebody that I certainly really respect and see eye to eye with in terms of how to drive value. It also does help that he has that finance background. Not every CEO does. So
that's actually an interesting thing, because there's about 1 in 100 companies have a CEO that used to be a CFO. So does he ever still try to, at this point, presumably you're a very superior CFO to him, but does he still sort of, forget that he's not the finance person a little bit? Or does that ever come into play that he, thinks he knows the CFO job really well still? I mean, he probably still does, right?
Oh, so he was never the CFO. He was
Okay.
deep into commercial strategy and
Got it. Okay. Sorry, my bad.
Before becoming a CEO, but he certainly has a very strong financial acumen and financial background. Does he think he's the CFO sometimes? No, I don't think so. I think he respects he respects my corporate finance abilities, and I think he learns a lot from me too, which is great. I think we just have a really nice partnership. It is at the same time, it is really nice to have somebody who I can say really articulate some of the more complex strategic finance ideas. And we explore a lot of unique financing opportunities and convertible debt, and some of this stuff can get very technically complex, and is very unique to where our company is in our stage of growth and where we are in our life cycle. And having a CEO who actually understands some of the vocabulary is really helpful.
Okay, that's great. I mean, it's got to be a tremendous thing from the investor standpoint that you basically have two financial gurus, different skill set, but yet a lot of financial expertise at the top of the company, has to be invaluable. So, but tell me also, I'd like to learn a little bit more about the team that you inherited and that you're building and continuing to nurture over at Dynavax. I know that's, building and leading teams is one of your professional passions.
It is. I was very, very, fortunate to inherit an extremely strong team at Dynavax. I was reflecting on our eras in the prior question of where the company's come from. When I joined the company, they had just completed and really completed a large restructuring, and the team was sort of working off of what I would consider a very streamlined and even skeletal type organizational structure. And the company had been through a lot of change, and it was a very dynamic time. With that background in mind, I think the team was probably a little uncertain about what to make of a new CFO, a new leader, somebody from Boston. So, not only am I a transplant with kind of a funny accent sometimes, I think you're always uncertain when you get a new leader exactly what they're going to try to solve for in the next 90 days, a year, 2 years, or what their vision is. So I feel like it was definitely a blessing to be able to have the opportunity to be able to have a group of people who were open to my leadership style, who have all grown tremendously as we've grown as a team. They've all grown, and developed in a really impressive way. Our team now, I think one of our strengths, we've got this sort of secret sauce. I always remind the team that you guys have this secret sauce thing. It has nothing to do with me. This is a group of people who just empower each other and want each other to do well all the time in their personal lives and their professional lives. And it's just such an incredible group that solves problems and, solves problems outside of finance, because we are a strategic asset to the company, and we're very embedded in the organization. And it's taken a few years to build those processes. But I think at this point, everybody's really proud of the work that we've been able to do collectively. So to be part of that and to reflect on the team, the team's progress over the last 3 years as the leader of that team, I just couldn't be more, honestly, I couldn't be more proud of that group. And for me, it's just, making sure that they are clear on what the vision is for what we're trying to solve for, leveraging the right technologies. I think it can always be difficult to focus on the long term when we're so entrenched in the day to day. And one of the areas that I can bring a lot of value for our teammates is helping them see that vision and focusing on those critical items and reminding everybody that, hey, remember 2 years ago, we used to close the books in 10 days. We now do it in 5. And by the way, we've been able to automate, over 10 to 15% of our previously manual controls. Kind of reflecting on these things that at day to day feel like such a grind. And then you reflect back 2 years ago and take credit for it. And I think goes a long way. So where I sit today, it's been just under 3 years of working together, and coming up on a great reflection point with a lot of wins behind our sails.
Sounds like you've had an impressive record on employee retention the last few years. You have a lot of the same people that were there when you joined.
Just about everybody. Yep. And
wow.
we've added some critical capabilities, and as the company's grown, we've had to add some technical expertise and corporate strategic finance to support our corporate development initiatives. We've also built out a little bit more strength in our investor relations capability and our internal communications capability, particularly because we have fully leaned into being a remote organization, which has certainly had its benefits and challenges, and we're still learning every day along the way. So we've supplemented the team and brought on some incredible talent, and folks just continue to learn from each other and grow together.
You could probably make a career now as some kind of coach to CFOs, because I hear over and over again the biggest challenges they face. Well, right now, Gen I is what they want to talk about a lot, but other than that particular one, it's all about employee retention. Even companies that aren't actively recruiting, a lot of them tell me they just want to keep the talent that they have, that they've developed over the last few years. So sounds like you've done a great job of doing that. Congratulations. So
thanks. In large part due to the success of the organization, I think as well. And I think people want to work with for organizations that are not only doing good work, but with purpose and sort of reasons they can be proud of.
Fantastic. And I want to get back to mentoring, because you spoke earlier about the mentors that are important to you. And, one thing I've learned, a lot of people have told me that I was one of the most important mentors they've ever had. I never even thought of myself in that role. I just I guess it was just because I'm a big mouth and I'm always voicing my opinion on stuff, is some kind of strange form of mentorship. But are you mentoring people at this point in your career, either formally or in a more casual way?
Both, actually. So the mentoring's, yeah, it's kind of a funny thing because I don't see myself as that either, Jack. So it's funny you sort of squared it up that way. Yeah, I think both. I do, look and think about all of the incredible mentors that I've had in my career. And at the time, they weren't set forth to be my formal mentor. They were just people who I really trusted and could get real advice from, even when I didn't even know I was seeking it. Sort of just like, hey, what do you think about this opportunity to take on this project? Or do you think, like, what's a great way I can ask to be in this room for this discussion just so I can listen? Stuff like that, where you just get exposure and grow and get that perspective over time. So because of the informal nature of my experience, I look for opportunities to make sure that I'm available for our employees at Dynavax, and even folks that I've worked with, and both at Ironwood and at PwC, and have met along the way at conferences, and all those other fun things that we have the opportunity to do as finance experts. And then on the formal side, I'll raise my hand every time when there's a mentoring opportunity that's a little bit more formal or structured.
Oh, well, that's great to know. And I want to get back. You mentioned a couple of times, you referenced that CFO is now a strategic asset of the company, and it wasn't that long ago. I mean, it's finance and accounting reviewed as a strategic asset. I'm going to do that over again. So, Jess, if you want to make note of the time. So, well, that's great. And I want to get back to something you mentioned a couple of times, that finance is now viewed as a strategic asset for the company, as opposed to, maybe a cost center or overhead or something like that. And, how do you do that with, scientists, for example, who are just brilliant in the lifeblood of the company? How do you sort of bring value to them and establish credibility for yourself and for the finance organization to crowds like that, and to sales and marketing and development?
It's certainly one of the biggest challenges, and I think just as challenging as it is to sit with that constituency and learn about the biology and the clinical and regulatory and technical risk that's with any given clinical or preclinical program. It's equally challenging, to sort of share different corporate finance concepts and different corporate finance perspectives. One of the things that we've been able to do really well throughout, that I've seen done really well at other organizations, and that we do really well at Dynavax, is create touch points where there is mutual sort of trust and education flow, or information flow, throughout the organization, where you can really have a dialogue around what different alternative paths for the different pipeline assets, and ways of thinking about commercializing a potential clinical candidate. And I think opening up that information flow over time builds trust, and will provide the finance team with the right information that we can do scenario planning, and importantly, sort of make sure that everybody in the organization who's impacted by that scenario planning understands, okay, this is our portfolio review process, and here are a whole bunch of scenarios, and here's what the financial profile looks like, and taking the time to really invest in making sure that the organization understands that. I know I spend a lot of time at the senior leadership team level walking through our long range plan and our views on corporate valuation, and our views from even an outside in perspective. What are investors saying? Who are we targeting from an investor perspective? What do they think? And what do we think? Where are there gaps? Where do we need to communicate better? And I think providing that education again, and it's a two-way street, because as much as some of the more technical scientific folks might not appreciate or fully understand the complexities of corporate finance and corporate strategy, certainly it's so much fun for me to learn a lot more about the ways that we're trying to help the scientific community and explore different innovations and breakthrough vaccines in our case, but medicines and therapies throughout the industry writ large. So
It's
it comes down to
interesting.
trust. Yeah.
I'm sorry to talk over you. My bad. So yeah, it's interesting because when I was a CFO, I was more traditional tech, and I did an internship at Biogen, but it was just a few weeks, so it was one summer. But one thing I've learned is that the scientific people, they all think that they could do a CFO's job in 2 weeks. They could master the job. I never had any illusions that I could run an engineering department. Most of them just think it's really easy. You sort of have to prove to them this is the value that I can bring. I'm not a glorified accountant. I actually bring some strategic and financial value to the company. So it sounds like you've figured that out. So, but you've mentioned you're a pretty intense person and very competitive. But of course, there is a life outside of work, and I'm wondering, what sort of you do to achieve that elusive work-life balance.
Very elusive. I wish I had all the tips and tricks. It's something that I continue to practice every day, and seek just as much advice as I try to give it. To me, it's very individual, and it sort of ebbs and flows on where I am personally in my life. There are chapters of my life where I'm very career focused and oriented, and then there are chapters where I have to take a step back a bit and focus more on my personal aspirations. And not to say I'm taking my eye off the ball at work. It's just, sometimes you can put in those 80-hour work weeks that all of our finance and accounting colleagues love to brag about, as we have the scars to show it. That's not sustainable throughout an entire career. And I think we all know it. So I think just being forthright about where you are and being intentional, like if you have a lot of energy to put into this chapter, and there's sort of a real reason to drive forward, great, deploy that effort there, and sort of know what your priorities are and do it on purpose. Likewise, for me personally, like I've got a really exciting chapter coming up. My wife and I are expecting, so
Congratulations.
Thank you. We'll have a new addition to the family, and I'm sure I'll have to, figure out all kinds of new ways to balance work and life. And believe me, I will be asking for all the advice from all the folks who have had to chart this course in the past.
Your first?
Yeah, it'll be our first.
Oh, congrats. That's you're in for the time of your life. So that's good. But it's interesting because you mentioned that, and there are people that are just driven. And long ago, I did realize that bragging about an 80-hour week is insane. It's not a badge of honor to work an 80-hour work week. We do it all the time, just, you do it when you need to, but not as a lifestyle. But even like I sold the CFO Leadership Council a couple of years ago. And, my wife thought that maybe I would be working a little bit less, because I'd built up the company, achieved some success, and then sold it off. And it just hasn't been that way at all. And, just because I'm driven to, even though I no longer own the company, I'm trying to build the best company and the best experience for my members and my sponsors that I'm capable of doing. I can't imagine I'm ever not going to be like that as long as I'm in the workforce. And you're probably driven in very similar ways. So, but I do know you're an outdoorsy person. You do camping and hiking and that kind of thing.
I am. Yeah. We have two dogs. We love to camp and hike. Well, hiking more than camping these days. Love to ski. If the minute I retire, I would love to just be a ski bum and, a lift operator, or a ski tour guide or something like that. I don't know what the best job for me would be, but it would certainly be in the mountains. And
okay. Well, like you, Kelly, one of the things I really would like to do is to change the perception of CFOs as boring and dry accountants. So to that end, I like to end these podcasts whenever possible, either by having my guests share a surprising fact about them, let us know what their walk-up music is when they speak at conferences or whatever, or maybe if they have a go-to joke. Do you have any of those that you'd like to share as we conclude?
Sure. I'm happy to share a go-to joke. Although I'm also happy to keep the perception of CFOs as boring accountants a secret that only we know. It's absolutely not true at all. It's such a strategic position, and one that's so critical. But my go-to joke right now is actually combining both the season as well as the sort of relevant financial concepts, and it's Where does a snowman keep its money?
I mean, I'm thinking the North Pole. I have no idea where.
A snowbank. And now that I told you the joke, I'm fearing that I actually just like I might have accidentally or inadvertently reinforced the perception we're trying to debunk. But here we are.
I find it very funny. It could be you and I are the only two listening who will find that remotely funny. So, but no, that's classic. If you think I'm not stealing that, you've completely misjudged my character. So, and since podcasts live forever, Kelly told that joke in early December. So, so beautiful. Okay, well, this has been fantastic, Kelly. And I know you're a public company CFO. You get a lot going on. I do want to wish you all the best with your new family, but mostly, just thank you for being a guest on Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. And I'll give you the final word.
Oh, Jack, thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. Also, thank you so much for what you've done, with the organization and even with this podcast to bring together the CFO community. I think it's truly valuable and extremely important for us to stay connected and learn from each other. And it's been a privilege to be here today with you, and also continues to be a privilege to be part of the Dynavax team, and excited for this next chapter of our story and my own career journey. So thanks again.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.